everyone. Good afternoon. It is noon. And to start off January on our Happy New Year, we are going to be starting a series, Cooking Through the Calendar. As you probably know, if you're familiar with either the Woodford County Extension Office or any extension office, that we have these food and nutrition calendars that we get every year. These are hot off the press, and we have them available for you to pick up if you would like one. Every month, we're going to be going through the calendar. We're going to be cooking the recipe that is for that month. So, of course, January, we're going to be cooking the January recipe. To start out, my name is Elizabeth Coots, and I am the Family and Consumer Sciences Extension Agent here at the Woodford County Extension Office. So I'm glad that you're joining us today, or if you're watching the recording, I'm glad you're watching the recording. So if you would like to pick up a calendar from the Woodford County Extension Office, they are available in the filing cabinet at the very front of our building in the third drawer down. It's labeled calendars. We have English and Spanish, so whichever you would like, you can come and pick those up. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and get started with the recipe. This calendar, well, it is a calendar and it has these wonderful recipes in it. There's lots of other information in the calendar, how you can make the recipe a meal, maybe some physical activity tips. Of course, when we start a new year, we think about being a little healthier, turning that page to the next chapter. So some tips about physical activity and being active, and lots of other resources in the front of the calendar and the back of the calendar, some produce availability in Kentucky, measurements and substitutions, just tips and tricks for being healthy. And also in the back of the calendar are all of the recipes. So at the end of the year, or now if you wanted, you can go ahead and tear out the recipe cards. They're perforated and they will fit nicely if you have a recipe box maybe, or maybe if there's some of the recipes that you don't want to keep, but there's a few that you really like, you can just tear these little recipe cards off and keep those, so you don't have to keep the full calendar if you don't want. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to the January recipe, and the recipe for January is called the Burger Bowl. Bowls have become pretty popular with lots of different, not just a salad, but lots of different ingredients in the bowl. So this is just kind of a different take on a bowl, or a salad, if you will, called the Burger Bowl. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start with our ground beef, which this recipe calls for. It calls for extra lean ground beef. And I'm going to have to look at my notes to remember that I say this correctly. The difference between lean beef and extra lean beef. So lean beef is per 100 grams of beef, which is about 3.5 ounces. It has less than 10 grams of fat, less than 4.5 grams of saturated fat, and less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol. So that's lean beef. So extra lean is the same amount of beef, so about 3.5 ounces or 100 milligrams, and it has less than 5 grams of fat, 2 grams of saturated fat, and also less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol. So extra lean is about half the amount of fat and saturated fat as lean. Now, it tends to be a little more pricey, but just buy whatever you can afford. So in the recipe, it calls for 1 pound of extra lean ground beef, and we are going to mix in that a half a teaspoon of seasoning salt, or whatever type of flavor you like. If you have an herb mix that you like, you could certainly use that. I'm all for making the recipe work for what you have at home and your family's taste and your taste as well. So I have already mixed the seasoning salt with the ground beef, and I've already patted it out. The recipe calls for mixing the seasoning salt and dividing the ground beef into 15 mini burger patties. And it turns out to be about the size of a meatball. meatball. And what I did was just patted them out and made 15 on my cutting board and made sure they were all about the same size. And then I rolled them and then made them into little patties, and I have them here. And it did make 15. But again, you know, that's for 1 pound of ground beef. So if you have more in your family or less, you know, you can adjust however you need to. One thing I do want to say about mixing the ground beef, and like I said, I laid them all the little, you know, portions out on my cutting board. I made sure that when I was finished with messing with the ground meat, that I washed my cutting board and the surface that I was preparing that on, because I'm also going to be using some fresh vegetables that are not going to be cooked. I do not want any of that raw meat to get on those fresh vegetables. So I made sure to sanitize my workstation after I was finished messing with the ground beef. So like I said, I have already done that. I have them patted out. They're about the size of a little slider. You can kind of see here they are. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in the skillet. Hopefully it's hot enough. I might need to turn it just a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and get those started while I cut up some vegetables. And I'm going to have to do this in 2 batches. They're not all going to fit in here, but that's okay. All right. So what I'm going to do next is slice an onion. So the recipe calls for a red onion. So I have one here. I've peeled the outside layers and I've washed it. So I am first going to cut off the top of the onion here and set that to the side. And now I have a flat edge that I'm going to lay down on my cutting board. And instead of cutting slices like rings, I am going to set that flat onion down and cut it in half this way. And I'm remembering when I cut that I use the claw so that I don't chop my little fingers off. Turn this down just a little bit. So the reason that I'm cutting it in half is so that I have a nice flat surface on my cutting board when I'm cutting, as opposed to trying to cut a ball. It's a little more sturdy, it's a little safer, and then I have half onion slices. So you can cut these as thick or as thin as you would like. And as I'm cutting, I'm just moving my hand back, making sure that my fingers and my fingernails are out of the way. And once I get down to this nub, it gets a little harder. So you have to be really careful. And I'm just going to move this to this other cutting board right now. Okay, and I'm going to slice the other half of the onion. Again, if you want it thick slices or thin slices, you do whatever your preference is, or whatever your family's preference is. So I'm just going to move these onions over here, out of the way. And then I'm going to slice my tomato. And I'm using a serrated knife to slice the tomato because the chef's knife just doesn't work as well. So I am going to cut the tomato though. I'm not going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut it like a ball. So I'm going to have to be extra careful. It's a little grippier though than the onion. So I'm going to again do my claw at the end of the tomato off. And again, whatever size slice of tomato you would like, you can do that. And this last little bit is kind of hard. And this little bit here, there's still pieces that are good on here. So I'm just going to kind of cut around the core. I'll throw that part away, but then I have just some extra little pieces here. So I'm going to lay this back here. And Marie, if you would go get the hamburger, the extra. And then, so we're going to leave that set aside, and now we are going to make our dressing. So the dressing is 1/3 cup, and I have it already measured out here, of light mayonnaise. And when you're buying light mayonnaise, you want to investigate a little bit. You want to read the ingredients. Sometimes, you know, it's a little tricky to know if it truly is light. Sometimes it'll say light, or it'll say low fat or low sodium. So make sure to read, you know, turn it over on the back and look. On this particular brand of light mayo, I flip it over to the back and it says Light mayonnaise contains 5 grams of fat and 50 calories per serving. And regular mayonnaise contains 12 grams of fat and 100 calories per serving. So you might look at the regular and compare and make sure that is actually what they're claiming. That's true. So then I have 1/4 cup of ketchup. Now, this is just, regular ketchup, but I noticed that there was a brand that had 50% less sugar and sodium. So that's the one I picked up. I don't think that there's any difference, especially when you mix it in here with this dressing. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 1/4 cup of ketchup to my 1/3 cup of low-fat or light mayonnaise. Right over to the side there. And then we have a tablespoon of olive oil and 1/2 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Go ahead and add those in here. And then we also have 1/4 teaspoon of sugar and salt each. Okay, so I'm just gonna mix this together. You really want to do this ahead of time so that the salt and the sugar has time to dissolve. Okay, so I'm gonna mix this really well until it's all uniform in the same color. It's kind of, it's a little runnier because of the oil and the apple cider vinegar. So this is going to be our dressing that we're going to be able to drizzle over our salad. You can see that there. So we'll just set that to the side for now. So now we are going to, let's see, I'm going to flip these burgers here. I wasn't sure how long they would take to cook on camera. So we have some that are already cooked as well. You do want to make sure that they're cooked thoroughly, of course, with ground beef. Make sure that, as the recipe says, that they are dark. Okay, so now we're going to plate it up. This is a pretty simple recipe. So the recipe says that this makes, for 5 salad bowls, you would divide this out. So I am just going to take a salad bowl here, and I'm going to put some lettuce in. This is my romaine lettuce. And you would just, again, divide it into the 5 bowls, but I'm going to just do it here for 1 so that you can see. I'm going to put a slice of a tomato on there and some onion, however much onion you'd like. I like quite a bit of red onion, so I'm going to put quite a bit on there. And then we also have some cheese. Now, the recipe calls for 2 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. And if you look on you might not know how much 2 ounces is equivalent to. If you look on, so this package of cheese, it's 8 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. It says in the bottom right-hand corner that it's 2 cups. So I can do a little math there. If 1 cup is equal to 4 ounces, then 1/2 cup is equal to 2 ounces. So it's about 1/2 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. And since I'm going to basically be dividing this 5 ways, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit over the top here. And I'm going to top it with a cooked, or actually, let's see, the recipe says 3 of the mini burgers. So I'm going to top it with 3 mini burgers here, and they smell really good, as you can imagine. And this is our burger bowl. And I have here just an example of what you might use to make this a full meal. Some carrot sticks, a piece of whole wheat bread. And then last but not least, to really top it off, I'm going to drizzle some of the dressing right over the top here. And you have yourself a burger bowl. Another way that you could do this, if you didn't want the little burgers, you could just mix the seasoning salt in your ground beef, cook the ground beef as you normally would, ground beef just in your skillet, broken up, and then sprinkle the ground beef on top of your salad. That way you wouldn't have to cut it, the little burgers, if you didn't want to. So I hope that this is a recipe that you might consider making at home. Remember, if you would like to pick up one of these calendars, you can do so here at the Woodford County Extension Office, third drawer of the filing cabinet out front. And if you're not located in Woodford County, you can contact your local extension office, because if they haven't given them all away yet, they also have these calendars. If you have any questions, you can contact me at the extension office. And if not, over and out. And we'll see you next month, the first Wednesday of the month, right here on the Woodford County Extension Office Facebook.